So here I am today, giving you guys my review of The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. Now, if you're new to my channel, let me just tell you I am a huge fan of the Hunger Games books. I read the books literally after seeing the first movie, which I dug. I own it, and I thought it was a pretty cool movie. And looking back on it now, it's pretty okay adaptation. The second movie I thought was fantastic. I have the review up on my channel, which you can go through and find it. But safe to say, I still love it. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was a huge step up from the first movie in a lot of ways. And coming into the third one, I was a little skeptical about the fact that we're going to split it into two parts. Because, look, I don't mind it when a studio decides to take like a big franchise and split the last movie into two parts. You know what I mean? If it makes sense. Like when they did it for Harry Potter, I was like, okay, that's fine because the Deathly Hallows book is so long and so huge that doing it in one movie wouldn't do it justice. Avengers Infinity War, I can understand why they're doing that because the Infinity War storyline in the comic books is so enormous that doing it in one movie wouldn't do it justice. You know what I mean? But Mockingjay, on the other hand, it is the shortest book of the series, and I always thought to myself, well, you can just condense it down to one movie, and you're fine. You know what I mean? So splitting into two parts, I was really iffy about it, and I said to myself, regardless, they're going to have to stretch some scenes out or make a ton of changes. Now, I'm going to start by saying that the movie, at least what I've been seeing so far, is pretty faithful to the book so far. I think by part two they're going to be doing a lot of changes, but from what I've seen, it is pretty faithful to the book. And I gotta say, Mockingjay Part One is such a great, I think, start to the end of the Hunger Games franchise. So it takes place literally moments after Catching Fire. Like literally, the first scene you see in the movie is like it picks up where Catching Fire left off. And I'm gonna give some spoilers away from Catching Fire. So if you haven't seen Catching Fire, might as well do it. But at the end of Catching Fire, Katniss discovers that like District 12, her home, has been reduced to rubble and ashes, and she's taken to District 13 to meet with President Coin, who's played by Julianne Moore. And what their plan is, they're going to start like a propaganda campaign to get all the people in the district sort of rallying up for her and start this revolution against President Snow, because that's really what sort of our main focus is. You know what I mean? And at the same time, Candace is really coming to the idea of being a leader. You know what I mean? And learning what that entails. And PETA is being used by the Capitol. You don't understand why, but you will. You don't understand why when you see the beginning of the movie, but you will at the end of it. Trust me. So yeah, I thought Mockingjay Part One, like I said, it's such a good movie. First of all, Jennifer Lawrence is awesome as Katniss. I think she still kicks ass as Katniss. I can't see another actress playing Katniss other than Katniss and Jennifer Lawrence herself. She was great in the movie. Liam Hemsworth is really good in the movie. I really thought I really thought that in terms of like Gale screen time, the way they've used Gale in the Hunger Games movies, this is the best way they've used Gale, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? And just the rest of the cast falls into place really well. Philip Seymour Hoffman, he was great as usual. May he rest in peace. Woody Harrelson was great. Elizabeth Banks was really cool. Was really cool in this movie, and it's interesting. I bring her up because in the book, Effie Trinket isn't used much in the book, but they decide to do that because Elizabeth Banks has made the character so popular and so beloved. You know what I mean? So it totally makes sense as to why they would do that change. And I thought I thought the way they've used her in the movie so far, at least in part one, was pretty good. I really liked it. You know what I mean? I really liked the way the political war is between Katniss and President Snow, and how like it's not just about them shooting guns at each other and fighting. It's more about them sort of like fighting through political propaganda videos and so forth. And I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting, and that really kept me paying attention to the screen. You know what I mean? Because that usually doesn't. But in this case, I felt it worked really well. And so I guess really one of the complaints I think people will have with this movie is that there isn't enough action. And that's true. There's actually one action scene in the movie. It's this action scene you've seen in the trailer where Katniss and Gale are taking those gunships out. That's really the only action scene you have in the movie. And I'm fine with that because this is a part. This is a two-parter. Part one is pretty much about the build up to the action. Part two is the straight action. It's kind of like how Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows was. You remember how like Deathly Hallows Part One was all about okay them getting ready to fight, getting ready to start Dumbledore's army, and them finding out that Deathly Hallows was, and Deathly Hallows Part Two was nothing but the war. I feel like that's what this is going to be, and that's going to be great to have the opportunity to watch, Mockingjay Part One and then Part Two come next year back to back, and just be like, okay, it is one complete movie, and that's fantastic. You know what I mean? And I do feel like some of the characters that I really really loved in Catching Fire are kind of, I mean, like I said, it's a two-parter, but I guess in this part right here, some of them just do feel like you really didn't need them, like Finnick in this movie. Like Finnick is my favorite Hunger Games character from reading the books and seeing him in the movies. He's great, but in this movie, he doesn't really do much apart from the scene he has at the end of the movie. And I kind of felt like you could have just saved that. You can save Finnick's character and leave him for the second part, and it would have been fine. You know what I mean? But they but for some reason he's in this movie and he's fine with it. But you're just like you're kind of pointless if you think about it. You know what I mean? But other than that, I thought Mockingjay Part One is a great sort of start to what we're gonna see. I think the way they're building things up is awesome, especially the way things end at the end of this movie. You're just like, damn it! You know what I mean? So it leaves you off wanting more. I guess that is a good thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I guess I'll give Mockingjay Part One, because it's a Part Oneer. I'm gonna give Mockingjay Part One a B plus. I think it's a really really good movie. I think it'll become a better movie once Part Two comes along. You know what I mean? And you'll have the opportunity to watch Part One and Part Two back to back, because that's how I felt with Deathly Hallows Part One. You know what I mean? Where Deathly Hallows Part One, I was like, yeah, it was good, and then Part Two, you're like, fuck, that's awesome. Then you watch both of them back to back, you're like, dude, that was fucking epic. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's how I'm gonna be come next year when Part Two's out. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Mockingjay Part One. What do you think about Mockingjay Part One? Did you like it? Did you hate it? I mean, what is your take on it? I mean, where would you rank in terms of Hunger Games movies? So yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Mockingjay Part One. And I'm not gonna be reviewing any movies that are in theaters until the Battle of Five Armies. But to make up for that, I'm gonna get myself pumped up for Battle of Five Armies by watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I'm gonna be reviewing the Lord of the Rings trilogy along with the first Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, because I've already reviewed Desolation of Smaug, but I haven't reviewed any of those other movies yet, and those will be coming in a few days. So stay tuned.